Weary soul, to Nocturne Lore, breathe with me now. Let the weight of the day fall from your shoulders. You are safe here in the quiet between heartbeats. Tonight, we drift together into the deep past. I often wonder where in this broken galaxy you listen from. The spires of Terra, the hives of Necromunda, or worlds far beyond. If you wish, leave a word in the comments below. Fay your city, your world, your corner of the night. I will read them all and know you are not alone in the darkness. Close your eyes now. The story begins. Lungs, and leave them again, softly, patiently. There's no hurry here. I speak to you now as I have spoken to so many before you. At bedsides lit by failing lumen, globes, in chambers where the machines breathe more steadily than hearts. In the long hours, when sleep, older than the Imperium remembers how to count. Once, they called me a remembrancer, a keeper of words, a witness to glory. And later, a witness to loss. I was there, 10,000 years ago, when the VIII Legion still walked beneath open sky. Name. Listen gently now. There is rain falling in my memory, a soft, patient rain, drumming against adamantium landing fields, taking like a metronome for the heart. The air smells of oil and incense, of parchment and warm ceramite. Banners stir in a breeze. Above, the sky is still blue. Yes, there was a time when even they stood beneath the sun. The Legion did not speak much even then. They were quiet among their brothers, not sullen, not hostile, simply observant. They watched how crowds moved, how silence, shadows stretched longer than the bodies that cast them. I remember standing among them, small, fragile, human, yet never threatened, never harmed. They did not need to prove themselves with cruelty. Not yet. Their armor was deep blue, polished, reflective. Lightning sigils etched reverently. Not scars, not trophies, but symbols. Their Primarch walked apart from them. Konrad Curze, tall, gaunt, his eyes always distant, as though he were listening to a voice the rest of us could not hear. When he spoke, that fear was not a weapon, it was a truth. People fear what they already know, he said. They fear what waits for them in the dark corners of their own thoughts. I wrote those words down. My hands shook. Safe. You are drifting. The shadows remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. At night, aboard the Legion ships, the corridors were dimmed, not for stealth. The slow ticking of cooling metal and footsteps, measured, respectful, no shouting, no laughter, only presence. Even then, I sensed something beneath the calm, like ice forming under still water. Curze's vision in shadow, hands folded, breathing as though sleep were a stranger. He would ask me what I saw when I closed my eyes. I told him the truth. Fields, faces, Home. He nodded, as though those things were precious artifacts. Change. No matter how gently I approached them, what answer could I give to a being cursed with certainty? So I listened, and I wrote, and I remembered. The shadows remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. Compliance followed. Compliance. Worlds surrendered without bloodshed. Populations subdued by presence alone. Sometimes the Night Lords never even landed. Their ships would hang in orbit, silent, unmoving, and below, cities would dim their lights. Curfews would be and did what armies could not. I began to understand then, this legion was not built for glory, but for inevitability, and inevitability is very quiet. Listen now, can you hear it? That soft ringing in the ears when the world goes still. That is where memory lives. That the shadows remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes, the long night is kind. I am still here with you. Do not rush. Let the breath come and go on its own. The story continues only when you are ready. Yes, like that. When I think back to those early fear learned, their cadence, I remember how ordinary they seemed at a distance, and how unsettling they felt when you stood too close. Breathing out, they did not tower in loud triumph like the sons of Gilliman, nor burn with the raw fervor of Lorger's kin. Breathing out, nor boast of victories yet to be won. Softly, instead, they listened. They listened to silence as if it were speaking. They listened to crowds the way a surgeon listens to a heartbeat. Breathing out, have not yet claimed the sky. Softly, it was then that people grew uncertain. When shadows lengthened without warning, I walked among them as they prepared for landings, my boots echoing faintly on cold deck, plating the air thick with incense and machine oil. Breathing out, calm, weapons checked without haste, armor sealed with careful hands, each gesture deliberate, unhurried, no shouted orders, no martial chants, only the quiet confidence of inevitability. Breathing out, one of them noticed me watching. His helm tilted slightly. Lenses glowed. Stars through cloud, softly. He said nothing. He did not need to. I felt then what many would later feel. That sense of being seen entirely, measured, judged, and yet there was no malice in it, only assessment. The shadows remember. Curze encouraged this stillness. He believed noise was a weakness, that certainty required no announcement. Breathing out, when he addressed his sons, it was never before assembled. Ranks beneath the blazing lights, softly. He spoke to them in chambers half, lit by lumen. Hum of transit holds between stars. I would sit at the edge of those gatherings, recording with a stylus that felt too loud in my own hands. Breathing out, Curze spoke of justice as something fragile, something easily shattered by spectacle. He told them that terror was not cruel. Fear teaches quickly, he said, and lessons learned in fear are never forgotten. Some listened with reverence, some with unease. All listened. Even then, there were those among the Legion who felt a tightening in their chest at his words, softly. They did not yet know why, only that something irreversible had been named. The campaigns continued, world after world, each surrender quieter than the last. Intermal one compliance, in particular, a civilized system, orderly, proud. Its leaders welcomed, imperial in voice. They landed at night, disabled the planetary vox, and vanished again. By morning, the city's lights flickered, crime reports ceased, and the planetary governor requested terms. Fear had done the work, invisible, complete. As the treaty was signed, I watched the hands of the governor tremble, not because of what had been done, but because of what might have been. That was the Legion's true strength. The unperformed act, the violence that remained only potential. Breathing out, the shadows remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. Success. Fractures began to form. Hairline cracks, barely visible. Curze withdrew more often. His visions grew heavier. He would stare at walls as if watching something crawl across them. Breathing out once, I found him in a gallery overlooking the stars. "No light?" he asked softly. I listened. There was nothing, just the distant hum of the ship. "The scream that comes after everything ends," he whispered. "It is always there, waiting." I had no answer, so I wrote nothing. Some truths refused to be recorded. Among the Legion, brothers began to enforce Curze's ideals in different ways. Some embraced restraint, using fear sparingly, precisely. Others lingered too long in the dark, letting terror become indulgence rather than instruction. Breathing out. Curze saw this divergence, and it wounded him deeply. Sons to be instruments of necessity, not monsters. That grief settled into him like a second spine, stiffening every movement. Softly, I remember a night aboard the flagship, rain tapping softly against armored viewports. The sound silent, motionless. I asked one of them if he ever slept. "Sleep is for those who believe tomorrow will be different," he replied. There was no bitterness in his voice, only certainty. The shadows remember. The cold caresses you. Began to whisper about the VIII Legion, breathing out, not praise, not condemnation, concern. Other legions grew uneasy around them, their methods too quiet, their victories too clean. Fear unsettles even those who wield it. Curze sensed the shift. He always began to speak of inevitability not as philosophy, but as sentence. "You will hate us," he told his sons, "and you will need us, until one day you will decide you no longer do." Those words fell like ash, soft, inescapable. I felt then that a drawing of a curtain, breathing out. Something precious was already receding into shadow. Listen now. The engines hum lower. The light dims further. Your breath is slow, heavy, safe. The shadows remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eye. Here. Only a slow widening of memory. Breathe in and out. Yes. Yes, just like that. As the years folded in on themselves, the name of Konrad Curze began to weigh more heavily upon the VIII Legion, not as a title of command, but as a gravity well from which none of them could fully escape out. I watched him change not in shape or strength, but in stillness, as if each vision pressed another invisible stone upon his shoulders. Softly, he slept less. When he did sleep, it was shallow, fragmented, haunted by futures, half darkness, fingers pressed together, listening to something only he could hear. Softly, he told me that time was not a river. It was a corridor, and he was trapped within it, forced to walk forward while seeing every door that led to ruin, breathing out. I did not yet understand what it meant to know too much, but I would learn. The Legion felt it as well, that tightening presence, that sense that their Primarch was already mourning them. They responded with discipline, with restraint, with deeper silence. The Night Lords became even quieter, if such a thing. Their ships ran dark for longer periods. Their landings occurred without warning. Their withdrawals left no trace. I remember walking through a conquered city hours after compliance had been declared softly. Lights dimmed, streets empty, doors sealed, no bodies, noise. It was the quiet that frightened people most. In that silence, Curze spoke more frequently of justice, but the word had changed shape in his mouth, breathing out. It was no longer corrective. It was inevitable. He believed punishment must precede crime. That fear of true deterrent. Softly, some of his sons nodded in agreement. Others looked away. I saw the first cracks widen then, not fractures, but differences in how darkness was interpreted. To some, fear was a lesson. To others, it became a refuge. The eyes, the long night is kind. Curze began to isolate himself further. He no longer attended councils. He spoke only to those he deemed capable of understanding the weight of foresight. Breathing out, I was allowed to remain, perhaps because I did not argue. The flagship. He asked me why I continued to record his words. Softly, because if I do not, I said, they will vanish. He laughed. Then, a soft sound, almost surprised. They will vanish regardless, he replied. Sorrow. The Legion sensed the change as well. They began to compete, not in valor, but in restraint, in who could achieve compliance with the least visible force. Softly, some became masters of psychological warfare. Projected messages whispered through vox, networks, symbols left explanation, rumors seeded and left to grow on their own, breathing out. Others struggled. They lingered too long in the terror they created, letting it shape them as much as it shaped their enemies. Curze saw this, and his grief deepened. He had Imperium, meanwhile, began to shift around them, subtly, almost imperceptibly. Other Primarchs spoke in private of unease, of methods too extreme, of a legion that ruled through dread rather than inspiration. Breathing out, Curze heard these whispers before they were spoken. me one evening as artificial rain pattered softly against the hull that he had already seen how this would end. Softly, "They will call me monster," he said, "and they will be correct, but only because they refuse to see the monster they require." I could not tell him he was wrong. Me knew he was not. The shadows remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. As the great crusade pressed onward, the Legion's reputation spread ahead of them, like a cold front, breathing out. Worlds surrendered before the first drop pod curfews at the mere rumor of their approach. Fear had become a currency, and the Night Lord spent it carefully. Yet Curze grew increasingly erratic. His visions came faster, overlapping, contradicting. He would wake mid-conversation, eyes unfocused, breath shallow, softly, seeing betrayals that not yet occurred. I once asked him if any future he saw ended in peace. He was silent for a long time. "No," he said at last. That silence stayed with me longer than any scream could have, breathing out. The Legion tried to anchor him. They followed him rigidly, but certainty, when taken too far, becomes cruelty. I began to notice small changes, excessive punishments, fear applied where patience would have sufficed. Nothing loud, nothing dramatic. Just a slow erosion of mercy. Curze noticed too, and it broke something within him. His own sons for excess. Publicly, deliberately. Not to humiliate, but to warn. Fear must be pure, uncorrupted. The lesson did not land as he intended. Breathing out, some learned restraint, others learned resentment. Cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. I remember the last campaign before everything changed. Though we did not know it then, the stars were dimmer somehow. The void felt heavier, as if the galaxy itself were holding its breath. Cursed softly, watching the stars slide past. When he finally spoke, it was barely audible. "They will betray each other," he whispered. "All of them. In time." I felt then the weight of inevitability settle into my bones, breathing out. History was already written. We were only... Now, the hum of engines fades. The rain softens. Your breath is slow, unburdened, safe. The shadows remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. Stay here with me. There is no rush. Only the slow turning of memory. Breathe in, and Nostramo returned to us. It did not feel like a homecoming, but like stepping into a dream you have been trying to forget. Breathing out. The planet hung beneath us, wrapped in perpetual night, its surface traced with weak, trembling lights that never truly chased away the dark. Softly, I had read the reports. Of course, every remembrancer had. A world without sunrise. A culture shaped by shadow. Justice enforced not by law, but by fear of consequence. Breathing out. But seeing it with my own eyes was different. The Night Lords grew quieter, still possible. Softly, their movements slowed. Their voices, already rare, fell away entirely. This was where they had been forged. This was the darkness that knew their names. Nostramo smelled warm. Curze walked among his people like a memory made flesh. Softly, they feared him, they revered him, they hated him, and beneath all of it, they depended on him. I watched citizens press themselves against walls as he passed, eyes lowered, breath held, breathing out, not because he demanded it, but because they remembered what he represented. Fear as order. Curze did not speak to them often. When he did, it was with sorrow rather than anger. Softly, he told them they had failed themselves, that they had chosen corruption over consequence. His words carried. The night lords spread through the cities without announcement, patrols moving like thoughts slipping through the mind. Present, gone, crime plummeted within hours, not through violence, but through anticipation breathing out. People behaved because they believed they were being watched. Perhaps they were. The shadows remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. Yet Nostramo was not healed. It was frozen. Curze saw this too, and it tormented him. He had once believed that fear could cleanse. Nostramo showed him the truth he had tried to deny, breathing out. Fear did not teach virtue. It taught obedience. And obedience, when the watcher turns away, rots quickly. I remember a council held deep beneath the planetary crust. Softly, a chamber lit every corner. Curze spoke with his captains there, his sons. He told them Nostramo was a failure, not because it was cruel, but because it relied on him. When I leave, he said softly, it will return to what it was, and worse. Some argued, others remained silent. All of what was coming, breathing out. The decision did not come quickly, but when it did, it felt inevitable. The destruction of Nostramo was not announced. There were no speeches, no condemnations shouted to the stars. The Legion simply withdrew, and then resignation. I watched from orbit as the world fractured, chunks of night drifting into the void like a shattered crown. Breathing out, Curze stood beside me, silent, his face unreadable. Mercy, he whispered, is sometimes the cruelest act. I did not know then. The shadows remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. After Nostramo, the Legion changed. Not abruptly, but fundamentally. They had lost their anchor, their justification. Fear was no longer a means to fragment in spirit, even as they remained whole in form. Breathing out, some clung desperately to Curze's original vision, applying terror with precision, with restraint. Others embraced the darkness fully, letting fear become identity rather than tool. Quiet horror. He began to punish excess more harshly, seeking to excise indulgence before it consumed them all. Breathing out. But punishment, even when justified, breeds resentment. I saw it in the eyes of certain captains. A tightening, a withdrawal. The Imperium noticed as well. Reports grew colder. Language sharpened. The VIII Legion was no longer described as effective, but as necessary, and necessity is a lonely place to exist. Breathing out, Curze grew more isolated, his His visions grew more insistent. He spoke openly now of betrayal, brothers turning blades inward. I asked him once, softly, if knowing the future made him stronger. No, he replied. It only makes the waiting longer. That answer still echoes within me. The shadows remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes. Behind, forever. Its fragments trailing them like ghosts through the warp. Without a home world, they became something else. Nomads of fear, bearers of consequence. Their ships grew darker, their markings more severe, their rituals more in the flagship in those days. The air heavy with incense meant to calm restless minds. Parchment prayers pinned beside maintenance schematics. Even space marines sought reassurance. That alone should tell you how deep the fracture ran. Curze withdrew almost entirely after Nostramo. Spoke less. When he did speak, it was often to the void, as though addressing the future itself. Breathing out, I sensed then that the Legion was approaching a threshold, a point beyond which return would be impossible. The shadows lengthened, the silence deepened. Listen now, the engines hum lower. Your breath is slow, steady, safe. The shadows remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. Stay. Yes, right here. Let the breath come and go without effort. There is nothing you must hold. Drifting night in memory. The VIII Legion no longer moved like a force with a destination, but like a thought that could not be dismissed. Breathing out, they traveled without a home, without a past they could return to. Only forward, into shadow. The galaxy felt different then. More violent. Heavier. I felt it in the corridors of their ships, in the way even the servitors moved more slowly, as though the absence of Nostramo had altered gravity itself. Breathing out, Curze did not speak of rebuilding, simply becomes part of you. The Legion adapted, as they always did. They refined their methods until fear itself became heartless, stripped of ornament. Pure. I watched them plan campaigns with minimal words. Maps illuminated briefly, targets identified. Then darkness again announced. They did not declare war. They simply appeared. A governor would vanish. A symbol would be found inverted. A vox message would loop softly through the night. Breathing out, not a threat, a reminder. And worlds complied, accepted these results without question. Fear, after all, was efficient. But efficiency erodes the soul when left unchecked. Among the Legion, differences hardened into identities. Those who still believed in Curze's original vision spoke of balance, of necessary darkness. Others no longer spoke of purpose at all. They spoke only of sensation, of the quiet pleasure of anticipation. Curze sensed this shift like a blade against his spine. Breathing out, he began to appear unexpectedly in briefing chambers, in armories, in cells where prisoners waited in silence. His presence was reminder of intent. But intent grows fragile when the world itself seems to confirm your worst expectations. I remember one campaign on a hive world crime had returned within weeks of Imperial withdrawal. The Legion arrived without warning. This time, fear was not merely implied. The streets himself, unhelmed, eyes hollow, voice carrying softly through the darkness, he spoke of consequence, of choices, of the lie of anonymity. By dawn, the hive was silent, not obedient, not healed, silent. Caresses. You close your eyes. The long night, his kindest backers began to speak openly of his own end. Not dramatically, not as a threat, as an expectation, the reminder of their own compromises. Some protested, some denied, most said nothing. Silence had always been their language. I found Curze alone in the observation gallery not long after, the stars sliding past like cold embers breathing out. He asked me if his monster. I told him history remembers outcomes, not intentions. He nodded, as though I had confirmed something he already knew. It will be enough, he said softly. If they fear what comes after me. That was when I understood. Curze did not seek vindication. It too, that unspoken preparation. They trained differently. They documented more, passed down doctrines, not as orders, but as warnings. Fear must be controlled. Fear must be purposeful. Fear must never become indulgence. Some listened, others did not. The cracked shadows remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. When word of Horus reached us, it did not arrive as thunder. It came as confirmation. Curze was unsurprised. If anything, he seemed relieved. They did not denounce. They waited. I remember the day the order came to change course. No speeches, no banners unfurled, just a quiet alteration of trajectory. Brothers began to watch brothers more closely. Old loyalties strained under new certainties. Fear turned inward. Curze withdrew, visions now relentless. His sleep non-existent. I saw him flinch at nothing, speak to empty corners. Yet when he addressed the Legion, his voice was calm. Measured, you will be judged, he told them. So will I. That was all. The heresy did not begin. A long, heavy, inescapable pause. I felt then that the galaxy itself was holding its breath, breathing out. Listen now. The engines hum steadily. The lights are low. Your breath is slow, safe, unburdened. Me. There is no sharp edge ahead. Only a gradual deepening. Breathe in gently and let it leave you again. Yes, like that. When the heresy finally unfolded into motion, it did not feel like a betrayal to the Night Lords, but like the lifting of a veil out. They did not ask why brothers turned upon brothers. They had already seen it in the way silence thickened between legions, in the way words were chosen too carefully. For them, the war began not with allegiance, but with recognition. Curze gathered his captains in a chamber, low, burning brazier, the flame wavering like a tired heartbeat, breathing out. He did not speak of Horus as traitor or savior. He spoke of inevitability. You will choose, he told them softly, and every choice will be wrong. There was no anger in his voice. Relief then. Others felt dread. Both reactions were correct. The Legion fractured, not with explosions or shouted oaths, but with glances held a second too long, breathing out, with hesitations before acknowledging orders, with questions left unasked. Early days, their presence unsettling, even to ally softly. They did not share campfires. They did not boast of coming victories. They watched and remembered. I stood among them as worlds began to burn, though not always collapsing, by hope slowly withdrawn. The Night Lord specialized in what was left behind. When loyalist populations resisted Horus' advance, the VIII Legion was sent to remind them what resistance cost, softly, not with massacre, but with example. A single execution brought planetary vox, a symbol carved and left unexplained, a rumor allowed to spread without correction. Fear traveled faster than any fleet, and yet something was changing within them. Without the Imperium's pretense of moral authority, restraint weakened, indulgence blurred breathing out. I saw captains begin to disagree openly, not about loyalty, but about method. Curze noticed immediately. He always did. He intervened harshly, publicly, punishing excess with a severity that unsettled even his most devoted sons, breathing cruelty, but to excise it. The irony was not lost on me. Fear used to teach fear restraint. Some understood. Others learned only resentment. The shadows remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. As the war widened, neither fully embraced by Horus' inner circle, nor trusted by loyalist forces. They became what they had always been destined to become, an instrument no one wished to acknowledge wielding, breathing out. Curze withdrew further into himself, his visions now overlapping, contradictory, fragmented, spoke of his own death with unnerving calm, as if it were a waypoint already passed in his mind. Softly, I once asked him why he continued if he knew the end. Because knowing does not grant escape, he replied. Only clarity. That clarity cost him dearly. Situations where restraint was difficult, watching who held fast and who did not, breathing out. Those who failed were punished. Those who succeeded were marked. The Legion became increasingly stratified, not by rank, but by philosophy. I watched friendships fade, sighed now, regarding one another with suspicion. Fear had turned inward. The Night Lords began to fight more often in darkness, void engagements, night raids, urban sieges where silence mattered more than firepower. Breathing out, they excelled, as they always had. But excellence without purpose is corrosive. Curze knew this, and it haunted him. He began to speak of the Legion's future as something that would exist without him, scattered, broken, yet enduring. Fear does not need a father, he told me once softly. It teaches itself. I felt then that he was already gone, only remained. The heresy ground on, brother against brother worlds, reduced to ash or worse. The Night Lords passed through it, like a cold wind, leaving order in ruins and terror in its place. Breathing out. They were not celebrated. They weren't what happened. The shadows remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. Near the war's end, Curze vanished from the Legion entirely. No announcement. No farewell. One moment present. The tightening. They had always suspected this would come. Without Curze, restraint collapsed unevenly. Some warbands clung desperately to his doctrines. Others discarded them entirely. Breathing out, the Night Lord ceased to be a legion in truth, becoming something looser, more dangerous. Recording what I could, even as meaning frayed. When news of Curze's death finally reached us, it arrived without ceremony. A fact, a confirmation. Some wept in silence. Others felt vindicated. All of them changed. Fear had lost its author, stretches endlessly. Your breath is slow, heavy, safe. The shadows, remember, the cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. Stay with me. Do not drift too far yet. The memory deepens here. Breathe in slowly and let it fade away again. Truly gone. Not merely absent, but severed from time itself. The Night Lords did not cry out, did not fracture loudly. Breathing out. They had been preparing for this absence all their lives. Silence had always been their inheritance. At first, nothing the void. The armor was still maintained with ritual care. The lightning sigils still caught the low light of dying stars. Softly, but something essential had been removed, like a shadow that realizes it no longer has an object to follow. Breathing out, orders continued to be given, still planned. Fear was still deployed with precision, yet without Curze's presence, fear lost its shape. I felt it in the way captains spoke over one another, softly, in the way councils ended without consensus, in the way restraint became optional rather than sacred. The Legion was no longer by foresight, only by habit. Some warbands clung fiercely to Curze's doctrines. They recorded his words, recited them before operations, used terror sparingly, deliberately. Others dismissed those practices as weakness. They had seen how the galaxy responded to excess, unleashed without apology. Breathing out. And so, the Night Lords began to diverge quietly, irreversibly. The shadows remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. I traveled with several warbands during those early years of fragmentation, breathing out different, like variations of the same nightmare. One moved like surgeons, infiltration, extraction, leaving behind only whispers and altered behavior. Another reveled in spectacle, lingering, marking territory with symbols meant not to teach, then that no archive would survive long enough to read it. Softly, the Imperium had changed as well, hardened, suspicious. There was no longer tolerance for ambiguity. Legions were either loyal or traitor. The Night Lords existed uneasily in between. Breathing, some Imperial commanders quietly requested their intervention. not openly, not officially. When rebellion required suppression without prolonged conflict, when an example was needed, the Night Lords answered, because fear still had value. But each such deployment, deep world on the fringe of Segmentum Obscurus, softly, a mining colony where insurrection had spread like mold. The Night Lords arrived without heraldry. Their ships, dark, unmarked, within a single night cycle, the rebellion collapsed. No mass exit precisely by morning. The population begged for imperial oversight to return. And when it did, the Night Lords were already gone. This became their pattern, ghosts cleaning up messes. No one wanted attached to their name, breathing out, without Curze to remind them of restraint's purpose. Fear became self, justifying. I began to sense something hollow growing within them, an echo chamber where only terror answered terror. The shadows remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The war bands drifted further apart. Some vanished into the eye of terror. Others prowled the outer darkness. Communication between them became sporadic, unreliable. They no longer gathered, no longer spoke of unity. The Night Lords became a legend fractured into 1,000 contradictory stories, breathing out. Some portrayed them as saviors, others as demons. Both were incomplete. I aged, slowly, strangely. Time no longer behaved properly around those who lived perpetually in the shadow of the warp. Softly, I remained a witness. I remember a captain who asked me, long after Curze's death, whether fear still served a purpose, breathing out. If the galaxy has become fear itself, he asked softly, what do we add? I had no answer. That silence unsettled him more than any scream could have. The Legion began to turn inward, preying upon rivals, upon one another. Old grudges resurfaced. Differences once tolerated hardened into blood feuds, breathing out. Without a central authority, violence found new directions. The Night Lords were becoming what the galaxy already believed them to be, and that realization wounded some of them deeply. I saw it in the way certain captains paused before striking, in the way they avoided my gaze afterward. They remembered being something else. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. By the dawn of the 41st millennium, the Night Lords were no longer a legion. They were a myth, sustained by survivors and victims alike. Fear without authorship, terror without philosophy. And warbands still avoided excess, still applied terror with discipline, still whispered Curze's words before operations. They believed fear should still teach, whether they were right or merely clinging to a ghost. I cannot say. I sit with you now, in this later age, to gaze into something Curze foresaw all too clearly. Endless war, endless fear. The Night Lords did not cause this. They merely recognized it early. Listen now. The void is quiet again. The engines are distant. Your breath is slow, steady, safe. The shadows Your eyes. The long night is kind. Remain with me. Do not hurry. This is where the echoes begin to overlap. Breathe in and let the breath drift away again. Yes, just like that. As the centuries bled into one another, the Night Lord ceased to experience time as a sequence, breathing out. For them, the past lingered like a scent that never fully faded. Nostramo Curze's voice, the quiet certainty of inevitability. All of it had grown tired even as memory remained sharp softly. But the Night Lords continued to move through void and ruin, through legend and rumor. They became more than warriors. They became a psychological presence. World spoke of them in whispers long before they arrived. Entire their behavior at the mere suggestion of their approach. Breathing out, curfews were enforced, lights dimmed, statues were defaced preemptively. Fear taught obedience more efficiently than any decree. And yet, something strange occurred. The galaxy began to mirror them. Other forces learned their lessons, copied their methods, adopted terror as doctrine. The Night Lords were no longer unique. This realization unsettled many of them deeply, breathing out if fear was everywhere. What were they now? I remember a warband that watching, judging. When they finally acted, it was surgical, minimal, almost merciful. They left behind a world changed, not by trauma, but by awareness. Another warband, however, burned brightly, too brightly. They lingered in their own cruelty, until rivals and imperial down. The galaxy called excess, as it always does. The shadows remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. The Imperium by then had hardened into something far removed from its original dream. Faith replaced reason. Ritual replaced understanding. Margins as fear became official policy. Breathing out as public executions and symbolic punishment spread. In that grim irony, Curze's philosophy was adopted without his restraint. The Night Lords noticed. Some laughed softly at the hypocrisy monster. One captain told me quietly, "What does that make us?" I did not answer. Some questions are meant to echo. I remained with one warband longer than the others. They still honored Curze's original intent. They spoke of fear as medicine, unpleasant, but sometimes necessary. They avoided unnecessary bloodshed, preferred implication presence. Yet, even they were hunted by imperial forces who no longer differentiated between philosophy and rumor. Breathing out, fear had become self-sustaining. I remember a night raid on a shrine world, not by the Night Lords, crude. The Night Lords watched from orbit, silent. They did not intervene. They did not approve. They simply recognized their reflection. The shadows remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. As the millennium, some documented their own decline. Others destroyed records entirely. They argued about legacy, about whether Curze's vision had been proven or betrayed. I was asked more than once to testify, to confirm what the Legion had once been. I spoke softly, carefully. Prevent suffering, not replace it. Some listened. Others dismissed my words as sentimentality. Time erodes conviction more thoroughly than violence ever could. The eye of terror loomed ever larger. Warp storms disrupted travel. That survived became harder, sharper. The Night Lords learned to live in permanent twilight, neither fully committed to chaos, nor fully separate from it. They used the warp when necessary, avoided it when possible. This ambiguity made them dangerous, unpredictable. When I wrote, my voice grew softer, but I continued, because someone had to remember the difference between fear and cruelty. The shadows, remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. By the time the cicatrix adapted to a universe without reliable light, breathing out. Darkness had always been their companion. They navigated fractured space with ease, thrived where others faltered. Yet even then, they did not rejoice. This was not vindication. It was confirmation. Settles deep and never truly leaves. Curze had been right, and that knowledge had destroyed him. The Night Lords endured not because they were strong, but because the galaxy increasingly resembled their worldview. Fear everywhere, justice nowhere. Listen now. The echoes soften, the void. Your breath is slow, gentle, safe. The shadows remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. Remain here with me. Do not strain. There is only the slow unfolding of memory. Breathe in. Became increasingly spectral, not merely in form, but in essence. Breathing out. The warbands scattered across a fractured galaxy, operating in silence, leaving only echoes behind. No one could claim to understand them fully. Not even the sons of Curze, not even those who had walked with him when he was alive. I traveled with a small contingent through the remnants of Segmentum Obscurus, worlds once vibrant now hushed, governors long dead or disappeared, industries abandoned, faith turned inward. Softly, the Legion moved like a shadow slipping over broken street, light of dying stars. Their presence felt more than seen. The Night Lords applied terror with ritual precision, no longer to teach, necessarily, but to maintain equilibrium, breathing out. Some warbands had adopted their own codes. This divergence was natural. I had already witnessed it in the decades following Nostramo. Yet the galaxy continued to shift. Imperial authority waned. The Imperium fractured. Chaos bled into space with increasing intensity. The Night Lords did not welcome it. To exist in twilight, where morality was optional, and survival demanded subtlety, softly. I observed one warband as it approached a hive world in the Segmentum Pacificus. The population was restless, governors corrupt, the law weak. The Night Lords did not issue ultimatum themselves. They simply appeared, a signal on the Vox, a shadow moving in the alleys, a symbol carved into a building, breathing out. By the time local forces realized, the Legion had arrived. Compliance had already been achieved. not through violence. Shadows remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is kind, the captain in command of this warband. A veteran who had once argued with Curze himself confided in me quietly. Fear is more precise than any weapon, but it is also more fragile. One misstep, and it consumes the bearer as surely as the victim. I nodded, breathing out. I had seen this happen before. I had recorded it, and yet the weight of watching never lessened. I followed the warband to an abandoned industrial complex where dissidents had gathered softly. The Night Lord's presence was barely perceptible. A whisper of movement, subtle rearrangement of guards, a scent of ash and incense drifting through corridors. By dawn, the dissidents were gone, not executed, not captured, only gone. The psychological imprint remained. They would remember the Legion forever, breathing out, and that masters of absence, emissaries of dread. Their legacy carried not in blood, but in memory. The galaxy began to reflect their presence in strange ways. Other forces, imperial and otherwise, learned to imitate. Symbols were copied. Tactics, it was not method alone, it was intent. Softly, Curze had taught them to fear in order to prevent chaos. Not for power, not for entertainment. Even now, that intent lingered, like a pulse beneath the surface. Some warbands failed to remember. They indulged quickly. The shadows remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. The more disciplined warbands endured, patrolling void space, striking where necessary, retracing Curze's lessons in silent devotion. I once asked one captain if they mourned him. He laughed softly, a sound like wind over cold stone. Loss, he said. He was always a shadow. We have only learned to follow it without faltering, and perhaps he was right. The Night Lords were no longer bound by allegiance, nor by love, nor even by vengeance, only by memory and instinct. I remained a witness, breathing out, writing as best I could, knowing that much would be forgotten. Galaxy's fractures deepened. The cicatrix maledictum tore sectors apart. Planets drifted into the eye of terror. Chaos spread like ink in water. The Night Lords thrived because they had always existed in that space. Neither fully loyal nor fully traitor, but all the exemplars of psychological dread. And even in absence, their presence was known. Across hundreds of systems, across the corridors of the Imperium, the shadows remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. I recall night's reports. Breathing out, hearing how fear altered populations, how silence commanded obedience, how anticipation became the most powerful weapon. And yet, sorrow remained, even among the sons of Curze, even among those who wielded fear with inevitability. Never leaves the mind, and the burden is eternal. The Night Lords endure, not because they desire victory, not because they seek conquest, but because the galaxy increasingly resembles the world they foresaw. Listen now. The engines fade. Slow, steady, safe. The shadows remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. Remain. Do not rush. Let your mind drift gently along the slow current of memory. Breathe something almost mythic. Softly, legends whispered of them across the Imperium, across worlds scarred by decades of neglect, rebellion, and subtle terror. Yet, to those who knew the truth, they were neither myths nor monsters. Observed a warband as it navigated a remote cluster of star systems. Softly, they avoided the attention of the Imperium as though it were a predator, and yet they left a trace wherever they passed. Not of blood, not of ruin, but of memory. A governor would find their records subtly desecrated. A message carried through Vox channels, a warning quietly implied, breathing out. It was never indiscriminate. It was never cruel for its own sake, at least for those who still remembered Curze's teaching. The shadows remember. Night is kind. I accompanied another warband to a frontier world, recently lost to the Imperium. Softly, the population was fragmented, factions bickering, loyalists disappearing quietly into the warp. The Night Lords approached without ceremony, ultimatums. They watched. They waited. By the time the factions realized their presence, the outcome had already been decided, not by battle, not by massacre, but by understanding. Fear applied with precision shapes behavior more effectively than through pain, but through anticipation, and as always, the lesson is subtle. Most never realize they are being taught, only that the outcome seems unavoidable. The warband's captain turned to me quietly. "Do you understand why we do this?" he asked. I nodded. And he continued, softly, "Because without purpose, fear becomes indulgence, and indulgence consumes us all. The shadows remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is kind." In those centuries, some Night Lords grew restless. Some began to push the limits of restraint, testing the boundaries of morality, not to rebel, but to understand conflicts. Sons of Curze, questioning the very principles he had instilled, balancing survival, purpose, and instinct. Others, however, clung desperately to doctrine, using the memory of Curze as both shield and compass, their actions measured, careful softly. Whirled, ash drifted like snow through the skeletal remains of buildings. Vox channels quiet. Only the soft footfalls of armored boots disturbed the silence. The Night Lords moved like shadows of their former selves, specters of discipline and dread. They did not need to strike to leave their mark. Presence alone sufficed. Breathing out, the galaxy continued its collapse into chaos. Wars became more frequent, factions more desperate, and yet the Night Lords endured. Because they had always lived in the spaces others feared to enter. Softly, movements. They no longer sought victory. nor revenge, nor conquest. They sought equilibrium, a balance between what must be done and what can be endured. Even in war, they remembered Curze's intention. Fear was not an end, but a tool, a guide. You close your eyes. The long night is kind. One night, aboard a derelict ship drifting near the Eye of Terror, I asked a captain if he ever doubted their path. He looked at me softly, his eyes empty yet aware. No, he said, doubt is a luxury we cannot afford. Every hesitation invites ruin, and he was right. I had followed them into countless systems, observed countless campaigns, witnessed the subtle sway of anticipation over willpower. And still, the Night Lords remained, neither heroes nor villains, merely a reflection softly. Their presence alone taught restraint and horror simultaneously, a paradox they carried with solemn pride for centuries, for millennia. I remember when a world once loyal to the Imperium fell to rebellion. The Night Lord inhabitants never knew why the uprising had failed. Only that order returned without fanfare, without blood, and that their behavior would be remembered for generations. In whispers, in instinct, breathing out. The shadows, remember. The cold, even after 10,000 years, the Night Lord's influence persisted. Across worlds, across populations, across history itself. They became more than warriors. They became custodians of a certain inevitability, keepers of consequence, and yet sorrow remained. What had been lost? Nostramo, Curze, the innocence of brotherhood. No victory could restore what had been taken. No campaign could heal the wound. They endured, because endurance was all that remained, all that the universe permitted. Listen now, softens. Your breath is slow, steady, safe. The shadows, remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. Stay, do not move. Let the memory settle around you. Breathe in and long since forgotten the shape of order. Softly, not merely in their movement, but in the way their presence altered the very behavior of those around them. I observed a warband drifting along the corridors of a forgotten hive world. Dust settled like ash on broken metal. Pipes hissed rhythm. Lights flickered briefly before dimming again, breathing out. The Night Lords moved silently, no footfalls louder than the echo of thought, no words louder than the faint whisper of a leaf against stone. They were patient. Remember, the cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. I followed them to the lower levels of the hive, where children played among rubble, and the adults scurried like insects in perpetual anxiety. The warband did nothing. They waited. A subtle movement here. Container there. A symbol scratched into metal that carried meaning only to those who understood softly. By morning, the behavior of the entire population had shifted. Not through violence, not through coercion, but through anticipation. Fear, applied subtly, is more of thought, and yet it carries a weight heavier than steel. Breathing out. The warband's captain approached me as the first light touched the spires of the hive. "Do you see it?" he whispered. I nodded. "Yes," I said softly. "They will act without being told, and they will remember why, even if they do not know why." He smiled faintly, a ghost of Curze's expression, and turned away, leaving me to watch the quiet effect of the Night Lord's presence. Softly, I had begun to realize that their work was not war in the traditional sense. It was architecture, psychology, a shaping of the galaxy that could never be undone. Breathing out. The shadows, remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. There were moments of introspection among the warband, rare conversations that seemed almost forbidden. They spoke of Curze, of Nostramo. "You think we are better than others?" one asked me quietly. I did not answer immediately, because the question itself carried danger, and yet I could only speak the truth. "Better is not the measure," I said softly, "only different." And always observed. They listened and returned to their silence, understanding without needing further instruction. As the centuries advanced, the Night Lords learned to wield absence itself as a weapon. A whispered rumor could undo a rebellion. A shadow crossing a street could prevent a crime. A symbol carved in the dark could teach lessons no sermon ever could. Breathing out. Some warbands tested the limits of this power, sending envoys to entire planetary systems, leaving no trace but memory and quiet apprehension. I observed one such mission on a small industrial world. The leaders corrupt, the machinery failing. The Night Lords did not arrive with guns drawn. They arrived in silence, gliding along catwalks, adjusting surveillance, altering routines, a subtle pressure that was felt, not seen, softly by the end with more caution, and no one could identify who had changed the system. Yet all remembered the presence of discipline, of inevitability. The shadows remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is come. Imperium weakened. The Night Lords endured, not through brute force, not through numbers, but through understanding the human mind. Breathing out. I saw the cost of this endurance. The sons of Curze were not untouched by their work. Some began to flinch at shadows, morality of their own actions, and a few began to vanish quietly into the void. Curze's vision, now centuries removed, was interpreted differently by each warband. Some followed doctrine with near religious devotion. Others created new rituals entirely. Yet all were guided by the same. Softly, fear as teacher, fear as shield, fear as reminder. The shadows, remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. I accompanied another warband to a system at the edge of the Imperium, a place where few traveled, where the stars themselves. The Night Lords moved through it like a slow wind, adjusting lights, repositioning patrols, ensuring that every decision the inhabitants made would be influenced without their knowledge. Breathing out, I asked the captain why they took such care. Because, he whispered, if fear is indiscriminate, it destroys the bearer as surely as the victim. We must be precise, always precise. And I understood then that the Night Lords had become more than warriors. They were custodians of consequence, sculptors of expectation. Softly, they endured because the galaxy required them. Because even as the Imperium stumbled and chaos advanced, their purpose remained clear. Listen now. Void hums quietly. The stars drift past. Your breath is slow, gentle, safe. The shadows remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. Stay. Do not move. Let the memory settle around you. Breathe in and release slowly. Yes, just like that. By now, the Night Lords had become ghosts in a galaxy that had long since forgotten the shape of order. Softly, not merely in their movement, but in the behavior of those around them, I observed a warband drifting along the corridors of a forgotten hive world. Dust settled like ash on broken metal. Pipes hissed with slow rhythm. Lights flickered briefly before dimming again. Breathing out, the Night Lords moved silently, echo of thought. No words louder than the faint whisper of a leaf against stone. They were patient, ever patient. And in that patience, fear spread quietly. The shadows remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. I followed them to the lower level. Children played among rubble, and the adults scurried like insects in perpetual anxiety. The warband did nothing. They waited. A subtle movement here, a displaced container there, a symbol scratched into metal that carried meaning only to those who understood. Softly, by morning, the behavior entire population had shifted. Not through violence, not through coercion, but through anticipation. Fear, applied subtly, is more efficient than any weapon, I thought. And yet, it carries a weight heavier than steel. Breathing out, the warbands capped fires of the hive. Do you see it? He whispered. I nodded. Yes, I said softly. They will act without being told. And they will remember why. Even if they do not know why. He smiled faintly, a ghost of Curze's expression, and turned away, leaving me to watch the quiet effect of the Night Lord's presence. Softly, I had begun to realize that their work was not war in the traditional sense. It was architecture, psychology, a shaping of the galaxy undone. Breathing out, the shadows remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. There were moments of introspection among the warband, rare conversations that seemed almost forbidden. They spoke of curse, of Nostramo, of you think we are better than others. One asked me quietly. I did not answer immediately, because the question itself carried danger, and yet I could only speak the truth. Better is not the measure, I said softly, only different, and always observed. They listened and returned to their silence, understanding without needing further instruction. As the centuries advanced, the Night Lords learned to wield absence itself as a weapon. A whispered rumor could undo a rebellion. A shadow crossing a street could prevent a crime. A symbol carved in the dark could teach lessons no sermon ever could. Breathing out, some warbands tested the limits of this power, sending oins to entire planetary systems, leaving no trace but memory and quiet apprehension. I observed one such mission on a small industrial world. The workers were restless, leaders corrupt, the machinery failing. The Night Lords did not arrive with guns drawn. They arrived in silence, gliding along catwalks, adjusting surveillance, altering routines. A subtle pressure that was felt, not seen softly, with more caution, and no one could identify who had changed the system. Yet, all remembered the presence of discipline, of inevitability. The shadows remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is kind, even if Imperium weakened. The Night Lords endured. Not through brute force, not through numbers, but through understanding the human mind, breathing out. I saw the cost of this endurance. The sons of Curze were not untouched by their work. Some began to flinch at shadows, morality of their own actions, and a few began to vanish quietly into the void. Curze's vision, now centuries removed, was interpreted differently by each warband. Some followed doctrine with near-religious devotion. Others created new rituals entirely. Yet all were guided by the same principle. Softly, fear as teacher, fear as shield, fear as reminder. The shadows remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. I accompanied another warband to a system at the edge of the Imperium, a place where few traveled. The Night Lords moved through it like a slow wind, adjusting lights, repositioning patrols, ensuring that every decision the inhabitants made would be influenced without their knowledge. Breathing out, I asked the captain why they took such care. Because, he whispered, if fear is it destroys the bearer as surely as the victim. We must be precise, always precise. And I understood then that the Night Lords had become more than warriors. They were custodians of consequence, sculptors of expectation. Softly, they endured because the galaxy required them. Because even as the Imperium stumbled and chaos advanced, their purpose void hums quietly. The stars drift past. Your breath is slow, gentle, safe. The shadows remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. Remain with me. Do not rush. Let the quiet settle into this age of the galaxy. The Night Lords had become something beyond simple legion. They were no longer defined by campaigns or by enemies. They were a presence, a principle, a shadow stretching across centuries. Breathing out, I traveled with a warband to a world whose history had been fractured by rebellion. Its surface scarred, its populations suspicious, its leaders fearful. Softly, the Night Lords moved quietly among them, never striking unless absolutely necessary. Instead, subtle of force, not because of persuasion, but because anticipation itself had been taught, and the lesson endured, breathing out. The shadows remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. I watched a captain pause atop of the Legion's work and sighed softly. Even if we disappear tomorrow, he said, the imprint remains. And that is our legacy. I understood fully. The Night Lord's power was not measured in victories or conquered worlds. It was measured in memory, in behavior altered silently, in the shaping of consequences before they could manifest. Softly, the galaxy continued to fracture. Sectors fell, where the Imperium struggled to hold together the pieces, breathing out. The Night Lords endured because they understood the inevitability of entropy, because they moved where others could not, because fear, applied precisely, remained a stabilizing force. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. I accompanied another warband through a chain of mining worlds. The settlements were chaotic, governance fragile, and the population restless. Softly, the Night Lords did not announce themselves. They did not land in spectacle. Shadows, part of the city's rhythm, invisible architects of consequence, breathing out. By dawn, compliance had been restored. The factions rearranged themselves. Decisions made without any leader realizing how subtly they had been guided. And when the Night Lords departed, them only as a whisper, a premonition, a shadow that lingered long after their absence. Softly, the shadows remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. I remember a son of Curze asking me once about morality and justice. I had no immediate answer, because the question itself was not simple, and the answer carried the weight of centuries. Fear without understanding, I said softly, destroys more than it protects, but fear with intent, with discipline. He nodded and returned to his observation of the city, silent, ever vigilant, breathing out. The shadows remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. As the centuries wore on, some warbands began to adapt, others reaching into the recesses of the Imperium without leaving trace. A ghostly presence, a thought in the mind of those who might oppose them. Softly, others fell to indulgence, taking the tools of fear as justification for cruelty. And in those cases consumed by the very principle, they misused, breathing out. The Night Lords endured, not because they were numerous, nor because they were physically unmatched, nor because they had the favor of gods or emperors, but because they understood the human mind. Consequence. Softly, the shadows remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. Even I, their witness, began to feel the weight of memory. 10,000 years of observing. Someone must remember, because someone must honor what was. Softly, and what continues. I remember a patrol through an abandoned hive, the dust thick, ash drifting like snow, a soft, lingering glow from distant braziers. The Night Lords moved only the subtle impression of power, only the shaping of understanding, breathing out. The inhabitants would remember nothing explicit, only unease, only a sense that the shadows themselves had judged them, and that they must comply. The long night is kind. As the galaxy decayed further, the Night Lord's presence became more vital. They acted not as conquerors, not as heroes, but as custodians of consequence. Softly, I wrote it all down, though I knew the chronicles would be lost. Whispers, yet even whispers endure, across systems, across generations, across centuries, breathing out. Listen now. The stars are calm, the void is quiet, your breath is slow. Even safe, the shadows remember, the quiet to settle fully. Breathe in and exhale, slowly. Yes, exactly like that. Now, after 10,000 years of observing, of drifting alongside shadows and echoes, the Night Lords remain not as conquerors, not as gods, not as saviors. Inevitability. Breathing out. I have seen worlds bend under the subtle touch of their presence. Cities align themselves without violence. Rebellions falter before they take root. Leaders adjust their thoughts before any orders are given. Softly, your eyes. The long night is kind. I traveled with a war band into a sector long abandoned by the Imperium. Systems drifting quietly in the void. Moons like pallid eyes watching from orbit. The Night Lords did not strike. They moved, and their movement alone reshaped fate. Imperceptible interventions. Messages left hidden. Lights dimmed at precise intervals. Doors locked silently. Paths redirected. All carefully orchestrated, breathing out. By the time the inhabitants realized anything had occurred, destinies quietly nudged, and they would never know who had done it. The shadows remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. Even within the Legion, time has softened them. Some speak less. Some move with greater deliberation. Some vanish into memory. Longer one survives, the more one realizes that subtlety is eternity. Softly, I recall a captain whispering to me once. Fear, he said, is the tool of gods and mortals alike, but we use it sparingly because it shapes not only others, but ourselves. And in that whisper, I felt the weight of 10 millennia, of all the worlds touched, all the lives altered, all the consequences measured. Softly, the Night Lords endure, because they were born to navigate darkness, because they thrive in the quiet spaces. Remember, always, the shadows remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. I have seen entire sectors whisper of them, though never by name, only by the shifting sense of dread. Only by the anticipation the guides themselves are aware. Breathing out, their purpose is neither vengeance nor conquest. It is balance. It is consequence. It is the memory of what has been and what must never be forgotten. Softly, even now, as I whisper these words across 10,000 years, the void, their armor catching the faint light of dying stars, their presence altering the course of worlds without announcement. The shadows remember. The cold caresses you. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. And now, weary soul, your mind, the memories of dread and discipline, of silence and consequence. The galaxy may wage war, chaos may rise, the Imperium may fracture further. But tonight, here, there is only quiet. The shadows remember. Into the long night, the embers cool. The ash drifts slowly. The rain grows softer. Carry this sorrow gently into sleep. Tomorrow is another war. But tonight, there is only quiet. Rest now.